Episode 120, here we go. 120 straight days in a row. Thanks for joining me for Live for 5 today. We are going to get a little bit into the weeds on carbon pricing in New Brunswick. How do we pay the federal regulations for carbon pricing? It's no secret that this government in New Brunswick has not been a fan of carbon pricing, and federally, the Conservatives are campaigning on Axe the Tax. Again, quite a swing from 2015 when the Liberal government won a massive majority on the consensus based around the Paris Agreement that, or the Tokyo Accord, that the Kyoto, wrong Japanese city, Kyoto Accord that we pulled out in 2011. I got into it yesterday. Canadians understand that we need to participate in the global community of keeping our carbon emissions down. And countries like China, even though they're used as kind of a punching bag in this regard, they are doing everything they can as well to reduce their emissions. And as I said yesterday, we are looking at a catastrophic hurricane bearing down on Florida. Climate change as a result of warming temperatures due to carbon emissions it's happening. And so we are part of a global community bringing that down. And so I wanted to catch you up basically on how carbon pricing works in 2023. I'll save you all that history about how the opposition between this government and the federal government and New Brunswick opting to have its own provincial carbon tax. But then, of course, we would not get the refunds, which are a key part of this that I do want to talk about. Every single time I hear opponents of the carbon tax, carbon pricing on fuel, whenever it's brought up, the rebates are conveniently left out. Okay, so before I get off here today, and I do have to go canvassing, Moore's Mills, I'm coming for you. The rain has stopped, and so I'm getting this in today so that I can be canvassing later. The weather kind of threw us today. But where are we? We are at the point now in our discussion about how carbon pricing federally works. What happened coming out of the 2018 law that was passed federally around provinces and territories pricing pollution? What happened there was a price was set on tons of carbon emissions. So it did start at $20 per ton of emissions that companies can measure. Now, the carbon tax is administered or essentially distributed, applied in two ways. There is a tax on liquid fuel or fuel in general, but again, we're thinking natural gas and what we pay at the pumps, quote unquote. And then there is a tax scheme or a schedule applied to industrial polluters, because of course when you see something coming out of a smokestack, heavy industry, you realize, well, that's a lot of carbon emissions. And environmental groups and the science does believe that the lion's share of the pollution reductions will come from incentivizing these heavy emitters as they produce things that we need. We're not demonizing anyone to reduce their emissions. And remember that conference that the federal government had in Vancouver in 2016, as they were reaching a consensus around how to meet Paris agreements, was about how to reduce emissions, but also remain economically competitive. That is a key piece at the center of the table. Canada does not want to see us injuring or damaging our industries as well. And so, again, just explaining it today. Tomorrow I will talk about how I believe, the Greens are for a simpler and we believe more effective method than carbon taxing. But let's get back to the price of fuel. So if we are taxing gas at the pumps, for example, that is what we feel. As just a normal New Brunswicker, we're pumping gas into our cars. Some of us are burning oil to heat our homes. And there was a whole controversy around Atlantic Canada being a little bit retro in the way that we heat our homes and our businesses. A lot of us are still burning oil. So there was a bit of an outcry on that. And I will talk about how that is factored into rebates when we get there in a few moments. But basically, the price of carbon pollution was set at 20 per ton to increase to increase year over year by $10 until 2022, at which point it would increase $15 per ton year over year until 2030, where it's a maximum of $170 per ton. So you can see the disincentive for burning fossil fuels that this has created. Again, many countries have adopted this, developed nations. We are just part of a community that sees this as extremely effective. So we are taxing fuel at the consumption point, you and me as New Brunswickers. And then for heavy industry, there's an output based OBPS, output based pricing system, which is a whole, I don't want to say confusing, but for those of us who are not in heavy industry, basically any heavy industry that is emitting more than 50,000 tons is subject to that output based pricing system. The reason that that is taxed differently than just the amount of fuel you consume is because Canada does not want to see its heavy industry moving out of Canada and going somewhere else where perhaps they would not be taxed on carbon. And so there is a formula for the number of output, whether it's producing cars or producing steel or producing lumber, whatever your output is, the more output you consume and the cleaner your fuel, you can apply for essentially credits or a higher ceiling. And that is a way to, again, keep our industries competitive. But I just want to go back to then how we, the people who kind of pump gas and drive our cars around, are feeling this and how it's portrayed. Because I did have a mayor recently on Facebook reach out to me, and I heard it at Meet the Candidates about how we just need to get rid of the carbon tax because we are paying for that, and then everything will be okay. And it frustrates me immensely that we never talk about the rebates that are issued 4 times a year under this plan. And I'm not sure if we're literally forgetting about it. Maybe you have auto deposit, but October 15th coming up, this will be your 4th installment this year of rebates from the government. And it is designed to lessen the blow to people who are paying the carbon tax. So if you submitted your taxes, if you filed your taxes this year or any of the previous years, you will be getting that rebate either in the form of a check or in your bank account. And I just want to show you how much you're getting. So this is on a table here. And again, I might be coming across as an apologist here. I'm not, because tomorrow I want to talk about the better system. But it's just disingenuous and dishonest to say we are paying 17 more cents at the pump now, when I want you to see this table. So all the prices are across the top, the provinces rather, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick. So New Brunswick is the 5th one in the column here, if it's too small for you to see. And as an adult, you are getting $95 in the form of that climate credit from the federal government in your bank account, or like I said, in the form of a check, however the government interacts with giving you payment. The second adult in the household gets $47.50 on top of that. Each eligible child is $23.75. And a family of 4, so my family, we get $190 4 times a year. And again, you just do the math, that's almost $800. So here's what's really important to remember is that 80% of everybody, 80% of all households will receive back more money than they consume on average, and more if you have heat pumps and use electricity. Again, you see why the government is doing this. They're trying to dampen and decrease the use of fossil fuels. So my house, you better believe that we spray foamed the headers in the basement. We made sure we got heat pumps, thinking about electric car. If we can get on electricity and stop burning fossil fuels, then you get even more money in your pocket from this rebate. Of course, if you continue to drive your 8-cylinder Hummer around and burn oil, you're not going to see as much kind of take home or profit from the rebate that you get. Okay, and so that's one thing that's really important to consider, is just that 80% of all New Brunswickers are going to see more money from those quarterly payments than you do pay at the pumps. Now, the government, when they collect what is called this carbon tax, the price at the pump. So in April, 3 cents more was added at the pump, April 2024. But all of that money is essentially put in a pot for the province of New Brunswick. So all the money that's collected from the province of New Brunswick is returned to the province of New Brunswick and distributed back to us in the forms of these checks. And that's why it really is on every New Brunswicker to say, okay, I'm going to get this money. How can I actually make it move farther by investing in heat pumps, electric cars, that kind of thing, as fuel is taxed? So everybody has to think about that. So 90% of all the money that is collected, did I say a different number before? My 80s and my 90s. 80% of all families will get more money back than they spend at the pump or heating their oil, again, on average, using oil to heat their homes. And 90% of all the money collected from the carbon tax is simply redistributed back to all of us with that average payment. And then the remaining 10% is used for grant money and infrastructural upgrades to schools and to workplaces and things like that to get our whole province more green. So again, the language around this, I'm paying a tax. I really do sound like an apologist, but the reason why I think people are angry or upset about it is because it is hard to understand how, wait a minute, I'm paying, but then I'm getting it back, and how much are you keeping? 100% of the carbon tax money is given back to New Brunswickers. I'm going to get a certain amount because it's redistributed, and it's up to me to adjust my lifestyle so that I can maximize my $190 every quarter for my family of four. And in addition, then the extra 10% is given to projects, infrastructure, green initiatives all across the province. So I know sometimes it can feel confusing as mud, but I did want to, if you're in heavy industry and you're wondering how it works for you, contact your local accountant. I do want to say fishermen and farmers are almost completely exempt from the fuel carbon tax. Okay, so that is really important in our riding, Campobello, and there are fishers who need to fill up their boats with diesel or gas or what have you, whatever form of fuel that their boats require, and the government has made it clear: farmers and fishers do not need to pay that tax. They do get an exemption form or a return on that money, because we don't want to be penalizing the people that are producing the food that we eat. So there's that as well. Okay, so I feel like that's a fair presentation of the carbon tax. Tomorrow I want to talk to you about, yes, that's hard to understand. It's also hard to understand someone who might believe that there's a better, simpler, more effective way to price carbon emission, and I will talk about that tomorrow. All right, I believe the rain has cleared up. Thanks for joining me today, deep in the weeds of carbon pricing, and that's the content you come for. And Morris Mills, I'm coming to knock on some doors today, and I will be in my campaign office on at St. Stephen as many evenings as I can be between 7 and 9 o'clock. I've kind of joked I'm going to start living in there a little bit. So if you want to pop by, I've got some team members there from 1 to 4 every day, and I will be there after dinner in the evenings making phone calls and ready to talk to you if you come for a visit. All right, that's what's going on for us. 12 days to go, I believe. Thank you for watching.